When it comes to working the lower back with calisthenics, which is a common question I often receive, my answer is simple. I typically try to avoid it at all costs. Hello and welcome, my friend, to the Red Delta Project YouTube channel. I'm Matt Schifferly, where we're making the whole world stronger with the power of calisthenics training. And today we're addressing that question I've gotten many times, which is how do you effectively work the lower back with just your body weight or maybe weighted or suspension calisthenics? And that's why I have that answer that I gave at the beginning of the video is I try not to, quote, work the lower back. And the reason for this is simple, is because physiologically, the lower back is much more like a joint as opposed to an actual muscle group. If you look at the muscles in the back, most of them don't reside in the lower back. Yeah, you've got the iliocostalis where you've got like some of the bigger muscle bellies kind of in the lumbar region and stuff. But for the most part, most of the muscles in your back travel and traverse your whole back and don't reside in just the lower back. And I know the exception to that, of course, is the quadratus lumborum, but even so, we're talking about a relatively small, weak muscle. And even then, a lot of what that muscle does is kind of more about lateral stabilization, which is why one of the most effective ways to kind of work that muscle is like suitcase carries with a kettlebell. And yet we have these times in our training when we're like, oh, I really feel it in the lower back. Oh, the lower back is really working. And we mistakenly think that must mean that my lower back is weak. Or if we're like standing all day and we're feeling it in the lower back, oh, it must mean that it's a weakness there. Therefore, I got to work it because once it gets stronger, then it won't be so much of a problem anymore. But this stress or weakness in the lower back is very similar to having weakness in a joint, similar to like weakness in your knees. Imagine if you were doing lunges or squats and you're like, it's all in my knees. I feel like my knees are working so hard, therefore I gotta work my knees. But really, we understand, of course, that if we're doing squats and lunges and we really feel it in our knees, something is wrong and we need to address that. And you want to have the same attitude with your lower back. Yes, you're going to be working the muscles that reside and run along your lower back, like your rectors, the iliocostalis, even your quadratus lumborum, but you don't want to feel like your lower back is an isolation or even focused area of stress in your training. And because what that usually means is that the supportive musculature for your lumbar spine isn't doing its job. And no matter how strong you get your back or even your lower back muscles, you're never going to have a, quote, strong lower back to overcome and eradicate those sorts of weaknesses or problems. So when we're doing exercises that involve the lower lumbar region, particularly bridge progressions in calisthenics training, we want to make sure that you're having a lot of engagement and activation in primarily your lats, those erectors that we talked about, and of course your glutes and your hamstrings. All muscle groups that a lot of people have a lot of trouble engaging and using through a big range of motion, which is why we often have so much lower back stress or work being done, is because those muscles aren't doing their job. When we're using them synergistically, the force travels through the lower back rather than into it. And when that's happening with particular like hip bridges and even the weighted stuff like deadlifts and kettlebell swings, you should barely feel like your lower back is really talking to you at all. And that's why overall, you don't want to feel like you're, quote, working your lower back, because when your lats, your erectors, your glutes, your hips, your hamstrings, and all that are doing their job, it shouldn't feel like you're really working your lower back, even though the supportive musculature for the lower back is certainly doing its job. And that stress, the strain, and that work that we often associate with working the lower back is largely absent, which is the way you want it with calisthenics training or otherwise. And one of the best exercises for that, of course, is the classic hip bridge. I made a video on a quick tutorial for that right here on how to set up, progress, and regress it so you're, quote, not working your lower back. And if you have other questions about that, leave them down below in the comments section. Thank you very much for watching. As always, be fit and live free.